So the one thing I want to point out about this scripture is that it's easy to think that the authority of Jesus has to do with casting out demons. But you see that verse 22 says, they were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes, before he casts out the demon. So his authority rests in his teaching, which is then subsequently what allows him to cast out the demons. So really the question we need to be asking is, what is under threat by Jesus? What is this authority? And in the Greek, the word that's authority means out of one's being. The literal, transliteration, not the transliteration, the literal meaning of the word is it comes out of one's being. So the authority is grounded in himself, because the scribes would have been teaching in this kind of footnoted way, as the great rabbi once said, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? And so they're getting their authority from other people that other people trust and know as legitimate. Whereas Jesus is probably not doing that, which is why they're like, whoa, wait a minute, he's not footnoting this. Sometimes we're a little suspicious of people that don't footnote stuff, right? Reasonably, because we don't trust their authority. But if they're saying something that's true, right, that hits you right here, you don't need it footnoted, because you're like, oh no, that is accurate, right? So what's under threat? Well, obviously, in the scripture, evil is under threat, right? Evil incarnate in this person. Sometimes translations say demonic spirit, sometimes they say unclean spirit, sometimes they say whatever, right? But it's there's something not right here. And the Spirit says, you want to destroy us. And again, the Greek word there is apolome, which means to destroy completely, right? And this makes sense to us because the concept of evil is irredeemable, right? As a concept, right? If we're going to use the concept of evil, then inherently in its definition is the sense that it is irredeemable. It is bad, it is negative, it is harmful, there's nothing good about evil, and we should offer it no quarter. We should offer it no sympathy for the devil, right? If it's evil, it's bad and wrong and should be eliminated. And so therefore should be utterly destroyed, should be obliterated. What's funny is that this demonic presence is in the worship space, in one of the people. And these aren't just rando people, these are a community of people. It's as if it was in one of us. And it was able to stay there unnoticed until Jesus showed up, which is significant. Because we think that these places are supposed to be these bulwarks against evil, are supposed to be protected, hallowed ground, that something, I don't know, semi-magical is supposed to happen that's supposed to seal us in this participation of religion. But it doesn't, and there's this spirit that's there, and it's unnoticed. And I think that's actually kind of a good thing, ultimately. I was thinking about it, because what happens when we think we know what's evil? What do as human beings?
Just try to separate ourselves from it.
Judge, separate, and pew, 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 right? Because that's the thing about evil. Evil justifies violence. Once you call something evil, then it is a godly act to obliterate, annihilate, completely and utterly destroy. If you really believe that something is evil, right? If that's evil, then it is worthy of destruction, because that's how we define evil. That's what evil means. Now I want to take you back to Genesis chapter 3. Chapters 1 and 2 are the two creation stories, but chapter 3 is the story of the tree, of the knowledge of good and evil. The one thing in the entire Garden of Eden, God was like, yeah, that's not for you. Why? Why do you think God would not want human beings who are supposed to be, some say, the peak of God's creation? I think that's a little anthropocentric for me, but still, right? The peak of God's creation, the most amazing thing we ever made. Why are humans not supposed to know about good and evil? Because we're not God. And And the knowledge of the difference between good and evil is God's knowledge. In fact, that's exactly what the snake says to the people. So this is the thing, everybody calls the snake a liar, but the snake never lied, right? The snake actually told the truth. The snake said, look, if you eat of this fruit, you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Well, the like is an important word in there, because what's one, I would say the primary difference between people and God? All right, I have an opinion about this. I don't want to just be like, guess what I'm thinking. My primary thought is that the primary difference between humans and God is that humans are incomplete and God is complete. Now, this often gets rendered in our Bible as perfect, the Greek word teleos, but it really means complete or fulfilled. And God is the complete, the all in all, as we say. And humans, well, we're incomplete, right? We have incomplete knowledge, incomplete experience, incomplete understanding. So what happens when you take your incomplete knowledge and start applying ultimate labels of good and evil, right and wrong? Yeah, we do, don't we? We kind of miss the mark there, meaning of the word sin, the literal meaning. And we kind of get a little dangerous when we're really certain, right? We're a little bit of a dangerous people when we're certain that we're right. When I do bystander intervention work, I've come to this realization that if I want people to engage effectively in playing out these roles of harassment and hate speech, I can't tell them to be racist, because they'll be very uncomfortable saying those things, and they won't really mean it, right? They'll be awkward, and it'll be terrible, and they'll feel bad, and then I'll have told them to say racist or hateful things, and then I'll feel like an ass, and then that's just not good for anybody. So what I do instead is I have them take a minute and think about something that really righteously pisses them off. What's something that's wrong and everybody knows it, right? And then I just invite them to embody that righteous anger. And then, oh my God, are they good at it? Oh my God, are they good at it? Right? They just come at somebody for littering like they were about to eat them alive. You know what I'm saying? It's amazing. Once you get somebody in touch with their righteous anger, they can hold on to it, they can speak out of it, they can point it at you, it becomes sharp as a sword, and it doesn't matter what the content is. And that's the whole thing about bystander intervention is, it's not the point isn't what the oppressor is bringing to the situation, the point is the energy they're bringing to it. And there's nothing like self-righteousness to have this constant well of energy to bring to a situation. Am I saying the thing that's true? We all felt this before, this righteous indignation. Man, it makes us dangerous people. And so it's clear that God wants us to resist evil, but it is also abundantly clear from Genesis 3 that God is really anxious about us being soldiers in the army of the Lord. Let me tell you, God's like, I don't know if you're a super reliable soldier in this one. That's why there's angels. They're supposed to do that work, not you, because we kind of take our own orders, don't we? We're kind of down to identify, well, here's the real problem. And we get it wrong. We get it wrong. But we want to be right. So badly. Don't we want to be right so badly? And our identities are caught up in being right, or more importantly, being good. Sometimes our righteous indignation is about proving that we're actually good, that we're on the right side of history, that we're standing up for the right people and we're supporting the right side of the cause. And we feel compelled to make a post or say something in a meeting or, express something. How many organizations have you all been connected to that have started to step out into political territory in the last, 5 or 6 years that they never would have commented on before, but they feel very visible and they feel like they need to. They have to make a statement on this issue and on that issue, on this other issue, and 100 other more issues. And then they get pushback because, whoa, this is not what we're here for. This is not the meaning or purpose of this organization. And Now we have to comment on everything because we commented on something. We can talk about that later if you want. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I want you to think about this performance of being good and how compelling that is, how called we are to make sure that we're demonstrating righteousness. Well, I know that I've said this a million times, but it came up again this week as I'm thinking about the demonic, as I'm thinking about the presence of evil, as I'm thinking about these forces at work in the world, that it is my understanding that the thing that is most under threat from Jesus is moralism, is the belief that we can be right and that we can know evil and wrong and bad, that which is worthy of obliteration and annihilation. Because what is that? It's a desire to have the mind of God. And once you have the mind of God, you don't really need God. Right? Once you know, you don't really need to learn. Right? Once you have an understanding, well, it gets kind of fixed, especially about things like this. And the second we don't think we need God, we are treading dangerously into the place of making ourselves gods and therefore monsters. And so I think that Jesus is inherently calling us out of this moralistic paradigm because it leads us to believing that we are God, or to taking God's place, or not allowing God and God's intrusion, as Tina pointed out, the intrusion of the Holy Spirit into our life. We say, no, we got this. Thank you very much. I'm good. I don't need any advice. I don't need any feedback. I don't need to hear what you have to say. And what are the two outcomes of moralism? What are the two outcomes of living in a binary right, wrong, good, bad world? Well, if you are right, what's the logical outcome of just being so right? Ooh.
Other people are wrong.
Absolutely, right? Self-righteousness and a condemnatory attitude. You are so affirmed of your judgmental position on other people. Because you're right, and when you're right, you're right. And what happens when you fall short of whatever standard you set for yourself about being right? What if you're not right enough, or not good enough, or you're not living up to whatever perfection, complete standard you're setting for yourself? That's when the shame comes in. So think about this. The logical outcome of a moralistic frame of mind is self-righteousness and shame. To me, those are the two things that are the most under threat from Jesus. Think across all of his ministry. The things that are most commonly confronted by him, most commonly obliterated by him, are self-righteousness and shame. And so if we're going to be followers of Jesus, then I think we have to start by asking ourselves, are we ready, really ready, to have moralism obliterated in us? Can we even imagine a world that we move through where we don't invest in right, wrong, good, bad, evil, saintly binaries? Even the binary of saint and sinner is a funny one, because in the actual in the New Testament, who's a sinner? Everybody. I like that it took us a minute. We had to think about that. Because what does it mean to sin? It means to fall short, to miss the mark, to have an imperfect understanding. It doesn't mean to be bad or evil or wrong. We've added all that stuff through a moralistic frame. We're actually just incomplete. And in the New Testament, to be a saint just means to be dead. That's all it means. It doesn't mean you're morally upstanding or right or good or pure or anything. It just means you're dead, right? But we don't criticize dead people, so they end up being right and good, right? Because it's not really nice to talk bad about someone who's not there anymore. Especially because then what happens is everybody you talk to, that becomes part of how they know that person. That becomes part of that person's legacy. And I've been thinking about this a lot around the idea of memorial services. And what's the thing that we want out of those that have passed on before us? more clarity about where we're headed, about what matters, about what's important, about what's worthy. And so when we talk bad about the dead, yeah, maybe sure that also names some injustice and some harm that has happened, but are we doing it in the service of healing that harm? Are we doing it in the service of moving back towards the path and the way? See, because otherwise it's just more moralism, it's more judgment, it's more standing on the seat of righteousness, which produces that resentment. See, Jesus always responded to suffering with compassion. His whole message was about how are we going to love through this? And that the alternative to moralism is a healing paradigm. What's going to heal this thing that we're encountering? Instead of judging it and condemning it, how are we going to heal it? And self-righteousness and shame can't handle a healing paradigm because that's not how they work. You can't have a healing approach and bring a self-righteous angle because ultimately you're just going to, you don't really deserve healing exactly. So because I'm such a great guy, I'll offer it to you. We're all disciples of Jesus Christ. And that doesn't mean anything about where you are on your journey. It just means that we're orienting towards him. We're choosing to let his message, his ministry, his teaching, his new authority reside in us. Right? We're willing to believe that there's something in him that speaks to something in us, and it's not validated by the world, it's not validated by the great teachers, right? It's not just because other people believed in Jesus that we'll follow Jesus. It's because there's something that speaks to us in the message of Jesus. And on some level, I think we all know that moralism is killing us. It's destroying our country, it's tearing apart our communities, it's toxic for our relationships. It doesn't help us continue to show up to the person who's suffering, the person who's in need, the person who's under the boot. And it doesn't help us actually feel worthy. It's this tenuous, like occasionally we'll feel like we're on top of it for a second, but we better hold on tight or else we're gonna fall off the razor's edge. It's not producing that thing that we know that we need, which is a settled, quiet trust that we're enough. We're already enough. We're loved. There's nothing that can take that away. And we are not getting it right. And that's okay. We're never gonna. But if we make space for God, there's more possibility that we will learn more and grow more. But we have to avoid the shame of this idea that we're not getting it right. And so we dedicate this space, we dedicate this church, we dedicate the work here. I mean, we can do this moral exemplar crap if we want to. We can try to be the right and good city on a hill that's a light for the nations. But what is the light that we're shining? Is it just our own goodness? Or is it that welcome that says, we're a bunch of incomplete people that don't really know right and wrong, good and evil, but we know what healing feels like. We know what freedom feels like. We know what love feels like and looks like, and that's what we're going to do. Because that's the way of Jesus. But I think if we don't exorcise the demons of righteousness and self-righteousness and shame and self-hate out of us, we'll just keep fighting that battle. And so the three things that Jesus always does with a demonic spirit, this is the last thing I'll tell you, the three things Jesus always does is he identifies it, and he silences it, and he casts it out. He doesn't argue with it. He doesn't try to prove himself to it, right? He identifies it, silences it, and casts it out. And so I'll tell you this one last story. So there's a woman in the community who reaches out to me. She's in a bad way. She feels like she is experiencing demon possession. And, wherever anybody's coming from, that's where they're coming from, right? I'm not like, oh, well, let me get out my book and see if this counts as real demon possession, or do I really believe in da-da-da. None of that matters to me. What matters to me is here's a person who's in need, who's interpreting their reality through this lens of demon possession, and I say, cool, you have invested me in the authority to have this conversation with you. Because if you were experiencing demon possession, who would you go to? Who would you trust to talk about that if that was your reality, right? She's trusting me a lot by coming to me and saying this to me. And so we meet and we talk a couple times, and she says, you know, what's happening to me now is that this voice is telling me that I'm not grateful enough for my life. I am not expressing enough gratitude for all the good things in my life. And you can see why someone would interpret that as this voice that's worth listening to. You could see why someone would hear that and say, man, I should be more grateful, shouldn't I? I am so entitled. I'm not grateful for my breakfast this morning. I'm so entitled. I'm not grateful for my husband this morning. I'm not grateful for the air and the birds and right? You could see why someone would feel like that was a righteous message. And so I said to her, how grateful do you have to be grateful enough? Did you think about your toenails today? Did you think about the atoms in the oxygen that you breathe today? How many things do you have to think about to be grateful enough for your life? And how small do you think God is that God's going to be counting out of the infinite things that have been given to you today? Oh, well, that's enough, right? So I said to her, you can't possibly be grateful enough for your life. And if that was the request, then inherently you're in this transactional relationship with God. You have to do enough to earn grace. And that's a lie. That's a lie that the devil uses, right? That you have to earn God's love. And so she's like, yeah, but how do I get out of that thought? I don't feel like I can say that back to this voice in my mind. Like, it's very compelling, right? It knows the ways that I'm not grateful, right? We all know that those demonic voices in us know us really well. They're very good at this. They're practiced. And I said, okay, I want you to think of somebody in your life who you never had to express any kind of bowing or showing. They would just always give you hospitality and welcome and love. They would always be grateful for you, no matter how grateful you were for them. And she's like, oh, easy. You know who she guessed? Grandma. Everybody picked grandma, right? Everybody picks grandma. And I'm like, yeah. So invite your grandma into the room with that voice. Does that voice have anything to say in front of grandma? And she's like, no, that's bullshit. Grandma would never stand for that. Exactly. So some of us can use Jesus. Some of us have a relationship with Jesus enough that Jesus can be the person we invite into the room, the person we invite into our minds and hearts, and Jesus can have that power to cast out those demons, to silence those voices, to say, this is bullshit, and you're done. I see you, be quiet, go away. But for other people, Jesus isn't developed enough in their spiritual life, in their understanding, in their relational life, to be that talisman, that power that they invite in. But somebody can be. Somebody who embodies those values of Jesus, that non-moralistic, loving, healing energy, can be that stand-in for the love of God. And so I encourage all of you, as you move through your life and have to battle these demonic forces of self-righteousness or of shame, these demonic forces of moralism and good, bad, right, wrong, good enough, who's your person, who's your anchor that's always going to recognize and silence those voices and give you the strength to cast them out so that you can live in more freedom and more healing and more love? That's the work that we're doing here. That's the work of Christ. That's the work of exorcism. And I pray to God that that's the work that we're invested in together as a church in the